Hello and welcome. This is Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and we are going to finish up this Frank's memorandum. This should be, I hope, our final episode or stream of this. But once we're done going through the Frank's memorandum, I do have it might be another episode or two about Odinism, kind of giving you an overview of what it is, a background of it, and how it ties into the prison system today and its prevalence. So we will talk about that at the conclusion of this memo. So definitely be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss that, and hit the like button, and let me know in the comments below as we go along what you think of this Frank's memo from Richard Allen to get a hearing regarding this Odinist possible angle that the defense team has dug up in their evidence, in their findings. So last where we left off, we read through conclusion 3. We read through part 3, and now we're going to just reiterate it in the conclusion, and we're going to move on to part 4. And then we should finish the memo in this session, and it might be a little bit longer, but we'll just do it. We'll push through so we get through it. All right, so conclusion of part 3. There was a reason that in his sworn affidavit, Liggett concealed key information from Judge Diener and lied about other key information. Had Diener known the hidden and falsified facts, then Diener would never have signed the search warrant. A search warrant that was already insufficient in linking Richard Allen to the Un-Alivings even before Liggett's lies and deceptions. Liggett's concealed and falsified evidence would have told a completely different story had Liggett not concealed evidence and lied about evidence. Richard Allen told Liggett to his face that he, Allen, had left the old CPS parking lot by 1:30 p.m., but Liggett opted to not let Judge Diener know about what Richard said. So he's just omitting things that the suspect is saying. So when Richard Allen drove away from the old CPS parking lot at 1:30 p.m. to go home, at some point in time before 2:15, a person driving a car that resembled a 1965 Comet, angular in shape and not black. Remember we talked about that last time. There was a different car in the parking lot that the witness saw, and it was a totally different car than what Richard Allen has. He has a black Ford Focus, and this person saw a classic 1965 car. So obviously that and a Ford Focus don't look the same. Anyways, so it was not black. Then at 2:15, Betsy Blair drove past the old CPS building or parking lot and observed the car and remembered what it looked like because it reminded her of her youth, the car that her dad drove in the 1960s. Because Richard Allen had left the CPS parking lot at or before 1:30 p.m., it certainly explains why the man that Betsy Blair observed at the High Bridge at 2 p.m. was a boyish and youthful-looking 20 to 30-year-old man with the poofy brown hair that looked nothing like Richard Allen, because it wasn't Richard Allen. So hold on one second. So as Allen had left for home a half hour later, so he, this is, let's go back to our images, the side-by-side. Here's the sketch of the poofy-haired guy, the young, boyish-looking sketch that it was released second, but it was actually the first sketch that was done. So they released them in the opposite order, but regardless, this is the man that Betsy Blair saw with this young boy description, which does not fit Richard Allen's physical description. All right, so there's a reason that the man Sarah Carbow observed on 300 North at 3:57 was not wearing a blue coat like the man Betsy Blair observed on High Bridge, the same man that Liggett claims was Richard Allen. So he can't be in two places at once and be wearing two things at once. It's because the man that Sarah Carbow observed on 300 North at 3:57 p.m. wasn't the same man that Betsy Blair saw on the bridge at 2 p.m. It was a completely different man that had mud, not blood, on his clothing. Betsy Blair saw one man, perhaps the same man that Rayleigh Voorhees, Bree Wilbur, and Anna Spath saw on the trail. So those are the other three teenage girls or young girls that were out on the trail that day too, who I believe Richard Allen said in his interview or his statement that he saw not two girls. He didn't see Libby and Abby. He saw a group of three girls. So those, I believe he walked past this other group of girls. So Sarah Carbow observed a completely different man. And while all these witnesses were observing two different men, Richard Allen was at home where he had been since leaving the Monon Trail on or before 1:30 p.m. That is the difference the concealed and falsified evidence would have made for Judge Diener. Exactly. I mean, if you're falsifying facts that, your suspect is telling you certain things that aren't matching up with what your theory is, then, maybe your theory's wrong. I don't know. I know criminals lie and all, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes people are telling the truth. All right, so part 4, Odinists in Westville. So this is specifically talking about Westville Correctional Facility. After his arrest, Richard Allen was forced to be housed in Westville Correctional Facility based upon a safekeeping order. Wow, I can't say words today. On April 3rd, 2023, two of the transport guards walking Richard to and from the visit prominently displayed multiple patches on their Department of Corrections uniform. And we have a footnote. At that time, April 3rd, 2023, the defense was fully aware of the Odinite involvement in the Un-Alivings, but law enforcement would likely not have known that the defense was aware of the Odinite involvement, which could explain why they felt comfortable wearing the patches so brazenly and on their uniforms at that. I'm surprised that was ever allowed. So the top patch, "In Odin We Trust," which I'll give you a picture of that too. Whoops, wrong way. There. So there's an "In Odin We Trust" patch, and then this other patch, which is like their symbol. They're these three triangles that are all intertwined with one another, tangled with one another. That is like the symbol for Odin, or at least for the religion. It's one of their main ones, and we'll talk more about their symbols and things like that in the next episodes when I go through the background of Odinism for you guys. Just briefly. I'm not going to do a whole lot, but just enough. All right, so on April 3rd, 2023, two of the transport guards walking Richard to and from his visit prominently displayed multiple patches on their uniforms. The top patch, "In Odin We Trust," was displayed under their embroidered name tags on the right side of their DOC uniforms. On the left side of their DOC uniform shirts were two patches. The lower of the two patches consisted of a partial American flag and interlocking triangles. The interlocking triangles is a common symbol for those involved in the pagan Odinite religion. Got another footnote here. An undercover state trooper who is familiar with anti-love groups, ruins, and Odinism. Remember we talked about runes. There's the the symbols. I keep going the wrong way. Hold on. These are the runes. These are all symbols that have different meanings and symbolize different things. So like the F, which is alleged to be on the tree in Libby's BLOOD. The F supposedly in Odinism stands for cattle or wealth, livestock. So selfish gain of wealth and wanting more is what I take from that. If it's used in a sense of, a ritual, like, a ritualistic unaliving, to me, the symbol F meaning wealth and livestock and cattle, but using that during an unaliving for a human being, it just sickens me. But we don't need to talk about that anymore. All right. At least not right now. All right. So those are runes, remember. And those are the patches. All right. We can go back. So above this American flag interlocking triangle patch was a patch that proclaimed, "I hate people." Oh, that's nice. Below are images of those patches. In spite of the fact that for over 5 months, from November 2022 to April 3rd, 2023, Richard Allen's defense team had been able to bring in their phones when visiting Richard Allen after Richard Allen's defense team showed photographs of a decrepit Richard Allen at Westville. Warden Gallipo apparently issued an order that Richard Allen's team were no longer allowed to bring their phones in. What's that about, guys? Because Richard Allen's team were no longer able to bring their phones, the defense team was not able to take photographs or video of these patches after the 3rd of April. So therefore, the defense is providing affidavits from members of Richard Allen's defense team that viewed those patches on multiple occasions after April 3rd. Here are the patches worn by the guards. The images below of the patches worn by Sergeant Robinson and Jones were found on Etsy. These patches can be purchased off of Etsy. So we just looked at those. You can find attached an affidavit of Max Baker, also the attached affidavit of Matt Hoffman. So those, and there's the "I hate people." Wow. And part of your job is to interact with people on a daily basis. I mean, not just people, but like criminals or, people who, usually criminals are in prison and you're in charge of them and you're sitting here spewing that you hate people. That should be a sign right there that the guy should not be working where he is. All right, anyway, so the first time that Richard's defense team noticed Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson and the patches shown above that they wore on their DOC uniform was on April 3rd, 2023. This also coincides with the time frame that Richard Allen's mental health began a steep decline. So you might remember there were pictures of him looking very thin and frail. I think I've used some on my thumbnails in the past, and just looking not well. And the warden apparently then issued an order not to have these, not to allow the defense team to have their phones, so they can't take pictures, which is pretty wild to me. All right, so this time period, the April 3rd, 2023, also coincides with the time frame that Richard Allen's mental health began a steep decline. From that point forward, April 3rd, 2023, these two guards, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones, seemed inseparable from Richard Allen. And that's according to an affidavit from Max Baker. So the two dudes with the Odin patches never leave Richard Allen's side when, especially like when defense team is there. That's the only way they would know, off of first-hand knowledge is when defense team is there to visit their client. And if these two sergeants are always a step behind them, that would be noticeable, I would think. So Odinite correction officers Robinson and Jones would walk Richard Allen to and from his attorney's visits, as well as one occasion when Richard visited with his wife, always wearing these embroidered patches. For a period, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were also videotaping Richard Allen and his interactions with his attorneys. This ended only upon complaint by Richard's attorneys after several visits. How is it even possible that a privileged conversation, even the jail system can't intercept those communications and to be videotaped? This ended only upon complaint. Additionally, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were always close enough to Richard to be assured that Richard did not feel comfortable talking to his attorneys or his wife without knowing that these Odinite guards were within earshot of anything that he would tell his wife or lawyers. It also came from the affidavit. Max Baker and Matt Hoffman have both been a part of Richard Allen's defense team since December 2022 and have met with Richard on several occasions. Paragraph 10 of Max Baker's affidavit provides insight into some of what was going on at Westville with Odinist guards Jones and Robinson. So this is part of an excerpt from Max Baker's affidavit. During one memorable visit on May 4th, 2023, myself, Attorney Baldwin, and Attorney Rosie met with Richard Allen to discuss matters involving the case. At this time, Richard Allen was in a mental and physical state of deterioration and was nearly non-communicative. During the visit, Richard Allen repeatedly asked whether or not his wife was okay and if his family was okay. He claimed on a couple of occasions that, quote, they were going to kill him, end quote. When asked who he was referring to as they, Richard Allen responded by saying, the guys with the Odin patches. Up to this point in the legal process, Richard Allen's defense team had never mentioned Odinites or Odinism to Richard Allen, either directly or indirectly. The first time I'm aware of any mention of Odinite involvement to Richard Allen was during a visit on August 25th, 2023, when Kathy Allen, his wife, attended and a discussion occurred between attorney and client regarding ties to crime scene. Interesting, huh? All right, so at an August 10th, 2023 deposition, the defense finally revealed to Jerry Holman, one of the main investigators on this case, that the defense knew that the evidence exposed the high likelihood that Odinites committed these unalivings by laying out the evidence right in front of Holman. Up until that time, the defense had strategically played dumb about possessing any knowledge of the Odinite involvement. That was a good strategy. This strategy was in place for many reasons. However, the defense finally revealed its knowledge to Jerry Holman on August 10th, 2023. 1 week later, during their first attorney visit since the August 10th, 2023 deposition, Sergeant Robinson, as usual, dropped Rick off at the attorney meeting. Sergeant Jones was absent on this visit. However, something else was also different on this visit. Notably missing from Sergeant Robinson's uniform were the Odinite patches that Richard's defense team had taken note of on every attorney visit ever since April 3rd. Perhaps not so coincidentally, after Jerry Holman became aware of the defense team's knowledge of the Odinite involvement in the unalivings, magically those patches were removed from Robinson's uniform, leaving blank spots where the patches used to be displayed on the very next attorney visit. So they saw where it was. You could see like it probably was discolored a little bit, or brighter. Like the rest of the shirt got discolored under the patch. You know what I'm saying? So there probably was a little almost like a shadow of where it would have been. All right, so the defense would remind the court that also, perhaps not so coincidentally, Tony Liggett was the only person that refused to support the transport of Richard Allen out of Westville when other options, Cass County, were available. So there was a county jail that was available to him, but instead they threw him into state prison, which is for convicted felons. So we still don't know, but they keep saying it's for his own good. And they refused to move him after multiple attempts. And then he got moved to a different prison overnight, or in like the middle of the night, and we weren't told really who ordered it or why. And he's now farther from all of his attorneys. So it's really bizarre how they've been treating him. And it's not right, in my opinion. Anyways. So Tony Liggett was the only person that refused to support the transport to Cass County. Liggett cited as his sole reason for rejecting Richard Allen being moved from Westville, 76 miles away, to Cass County / Logansport is that he, Liggett, would have difficulty transporting Richard Allen to Delphi from Logansport for hearings and trial, a distance of less than 20 miles. So he's now farther away, but they're saying it's easier for him to get transport? And that doesn't make sense. So that's according to the depot, that footnote. Certainly, state police were available to assist in transport of Carroll County if Carroll County could not. Yet Liggett refused to agree to the transport, leaving Richard Allen in Westville guarded by Odinists. When factoring everything contained in this memorandum, Liggett's objection to moving Richard Allen to Cass County over transportation concerns is troubling, especially when the patches were moved after the depots happened. Sorry, I need my water. So what do you guys think about that? The fact that they could have put him in Cass County, which was only 20 miles away, but they're saying that for transportation reasons, they needed to put him at a prison, a state prison, which is 76 miles away. And then when they transfer him, they're going to transfer him even further away than that. When they transfer him in the middle of the night, he's now even further away. And he's got these guards apparently with Odinite patches on that are watching his every move, it seems. I don't know. Something's fishy in Delphi. All right. So also filed contemporaneously with the Frank's motion and memorandum is the defense's emergency request to transport Richard Allen out of Westville to the Cass County Jail, despite Tony Liggett's objection to the same, as the defense has legitimate concerns of Richard's safety once this motion and memorandum are filed. Beyond Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson wearing in Odin We Trust patches, what else links them to Odinism? Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson's relationship with Odinism went beyond the patches, and they even each proudly displayed while transporting Richard Allen to and from his attorney's office. So they all I just don't get how they were wearing patches on their uniforms, guys. I mean, that must mean like the warden is okay with Odinist beliefs, which makes me think maybe the warden is an Odinist, or somebody, high up running the prison is into Odinism, because why would you let your guards walk around with those patches. You're not supposed to put anything on your uniforms. So, I don't know. All right, so Sergeant Robinson, on his Facebook page, Sergeant Robinson does not hide his devotion to Odinism. On June 25th, 2023, Robinson posted a photo of what the defense would call an altar featuring horns, antlers, and Thor's hammer, and a dish sitting atop some type of animal fur with various runes decorating the outer edges of the dish. All these items were placed on what appears to be a circular wooden platter. And that's all from depots. It appears that Sergeant Jones liked Sergeant Robinson's Odin altar poster. Sergeant Robinson's altar to Odin is similar to an altar to Odin posted by none other than our guy Brad Holder. And that all comes from some depots, I believe. All right, so as stated by Max Baker in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was involved in transporting Richard Allen to most, if not all, of his attorney visits. Sergeant Robinson always wore his Odin patches. However, the change following Holman's contentious August 10th, 2023 deposition. In that deposition, which has been attached, so they provided the deposition as an exhibit, provided to the court about 2/3 of the way through the deposition. Holman begins getting called out by the defense for Unified Command's incompetent handling of the Odin aspect of the investigation. It was also at that point in the deposition that the defense began asking critical questions concerning the way that Unified Command handled the investigation of Brad Holder, Patrick Westville, Johnny Messer, and Elvis Fields. Here it says in the footnote, Holman's deposition has been provided for the court. The contentiousness of the deposition began on page 210 and lasted throughout the rest of the depo. All right, so that's too bad. We probably won't get to read it, but. All right, so you will note that nowhere in this deposition did the defense reveal that Holman, that the defense, was aware that Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones were wearing the In Odin We Trust patches. Attorney Rosie and defense team member Max Baker visited Richard Allen on August 17th, 2023, only 7 days after the contentious deposition with Holman, in which it became obvious that the defense was fully aware of the strong evidence that Odinists committed these unalivings. At this point, August 17th, 2017 visitation, as Max Baker states in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson no longer was wearing his patch. And it's coming from an affidavit of Max Baker. The defense team has no direct knowledge as to whether Jerry Holman or anyone from Unified Command contacted Sergeant Robinson or anyone else from Westville to alert them that Rick's defense team was fully aware of the evidence supporting Odinists being involved. However, it is certainly a curiosity that deserves attention and consideration. Well, I think so. What do you think? Is it just coincidence that his patches just disappeared suddenly off of his uniform? Or do you think he was tipped off by somebody? Does that mean there's somebody high up in the prison system that's running the prison system that knows about this Odinist angle? Is it that the whole town knows and the people that did it have so much power that nobody wants to turn them in? Or is everyone in the town part Odinist? So it's all secret to everybody. Like it's the secret code that you don't talk about. I don't know. I have my All right, try to close my water. I wonder. This case makes me wonder a lot of things, actually. All right, so as Max Baker also... Did I finish that? Yeah. All right, so as Max Baker also describes in his affidavit, Sergeant Robinson was always within a few feet of Richard Allen during Allen's meeting with his wife, Kathy. So the 2 visits that Richard had with his wife were without the hustle and bustle and noise of other inmates during their visitation. While Warden Gallipo may claim that Westville was doing Richard a favor by allowing him privacy with his wife, the defense views it differently. With no other inmates in the room was completely quiet. Sergeant Robinson could hear everything that Richard told his wife. Certainly Robinson and Jones stood close enough to Richard to intimidate him from talking openly and honestly to his wife about what was going on at the prison. They're making really good points, guys. The defense team is making some really good points, and yet Judge Gull just denied it without a hearing. Anyways, she needs to go, in my opinion. Additionally, in their combined 50-plus years of practicing criminal defense, attorneys Baldwin and Rosie have never had their purported confidential attorney visits videotaped with a handheld recorder. A handheld recorder? Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson, I thought it was just like, this room is monitored and we're recording you. But no, somebody stood there with a camcorder holding it. Unless it was on a tripod, but I doubt it. All right, so Sergeant Jones and Robinson, beginning April 3rd, 2023, began videotaping Richard Allen's interactions with his attorneys. Particularly outrageous was the fact that Richard Allen was required to face the camcorder from about 10 feet away through a glass. This means that Richard's mouth was being videotaped. This means that Richard was not able to talk freely to his attorneys and say things like, "They are stating that if I don't tell my wife that I am guilty, then they said they are going to harm my wife." If Richard were to say something like that, it would be on video. Remember, Richard Allen continuously asked his defense team if his wife was okay and if his family was okay. That comes from affidavit of Max Baker. The defense has obtained video from the prison. One of the videos that we obtained show the aftermath of something that happened to Richard Allen. Find attached a still shot of Richard Allen taken from video that Westville produced. The defense does not have the exact date, but the video indicates that the video was taken between May 26th and May 30th. The still shot is attached to this memorandum and filed as Exhibit 121. The defense is not sure exactly what happened to Richard Allen that caused him to look the way depicted in the still shot. Whether it was self-harm or something else, the fact that Richard is being watched by Odinites and the evidence strongly supports Odinite involvement in the murders causes great concern for the defense in terms of Rick's safety. Additionally, in Matt Hoffman's affidavit, you will find that at the last hearing on June 15th, 2023, Rick was constantly pleading with the guards not to shock him. "Please don't shock me. Please don't shock me. Please don't shock me." Matt Hoffman indicated that Rick made the comment in front of multiple guards and in front of multiple members of Rick's defense team. Now, who's Sergeant Jones? Sergeant Jones's Facebook posts reveal his ties to Odinism. Find attached an image taken from Sergeant Jones' Facebook page, marked Exhibit 122. As you can see, the interlocking triangles that appear on Sergeant Jones' patch also appear in this photo. You will also notice a rune in the lower left-hand corner of the photo. It is hard to see because it is black, but also remember that Sergeant Jones liked Sergeant Robinson's altar to Odin on Facebook. The defense would request the court to review Max Baker Max Baker's affidavit to learn of Sergeant Jones' involvement in guarding Richard Allen. It is nearly identical to Sergeant Robinson's involvement. Conclusion of Part 4. They don't teach you in law school what to do when your client, who is accused of unaliving, is being guarded by members of a religious cult whose members evidence strongly supports were the actual unalivers. And that is coming from, again, the defense is not claiming that Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson are involved in the unalivings, just that they are Odinists, members of the same religious cult that evidence strongly supports were involved in the unalivings of Abby and Libby. And we've already gone through why, especially with the runes and the F tree and all the things. We've gone through why it's likely an Odinist tied crime, and Richard Allen is likely not guilty if that is the case. All right, so yet that is where we are. At some point in time, coincidences cease to be coincidences. The fact that Liggett did not want Richard Allen to be removed from Westville, purportedly over transportation issues, is curious. The fact that Odinites are guarding Richard is very concerning, or at the very least, curious, considering that the evidence discussed in this memorandum, The fact that Sergeant Robinson stopped wearing his In Odin We Trust patches within days of Jerry Holman and the Unified Command learning that the defense was fully aware of the evidence linking Odinists to the crime scene, and that the Unified Command had avoided investigating Odinists, is curious. Again, the court must determine whether Liggett acted intentionally or recklessly when he omitted or lied about information when he drafted the affidavit for search warrant. So they're saying it's up to you, judge, to decide whether he told the truth, whether he lied, whether he purposely or negligently omitted certain things from his report to Judge Diener. So it's up to you, judge, to figure out what his intentions were. So the defense would ask the court to consider that Liggett objecting to Richard Allen's transfer to Cass County over transportation issues is evidence of intentionality, in that Liggett wanted Allen to remain in Westville guarded by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones and any other Odinite that the defense has not learned works in Westville. Something along those lines. That was a poorly written sentence. Part 5. We've got a part 5. So what do you guys think about Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones? And do you believe there's a coincidence? Do you believe in coincidences? Do you believe it's a coincidence that these patches just went away as soon as the defense let out their strategy to the prosecution? Do you think that the prosecution and law enforcement were hoping that they didn't find this, the defense team? Seems that way to me. All right, we're going to get through the rest of this. All right, so part 5. Richard Allen has no ties to Odinism or any religious cult and has no ties to the crime scene. All right, so Tony Liggett has testified under oath that there is no DNA linking Richard Allen to the crime scene. And if we scroll down and look at that, okay, so all of these are depositions. All right, so Liggett further has testified that he is unaware of anything that links Richard to the crime through his phone, computers, or devices. So even Liggett has testified on the stand, I don't have any ties Nothing from Richard's phone, computer, anything tied him to the girls. So that's very telling to me. Liggett has further testified that he is unaware of any evidence that links Richard Allen to any weird religious cult group. These are all coming from depots. Jerry Holman has testified to the following. There is no DNA linking Richard Allen to the crime scene. No data extracted from Richard Allen's phone connects him to the Unalivings. No data extracted from Libby's phone connected Richard to the Unalivings. There is no evidence that Richard Allen is or was connected to any other suspects in the case. So not even Brad Holder. He doesn't know them. He doesn't know this group. There is no evidence that Richard Allen is connected. There is no evidence found on social media that connects Richard Allen to the Unalivings. There's no evidence extracted from his phones or computers that connect him to the Unalivings, and there is no fingerprint evidence that connects him to the Unalivings. This section is very short because there is simply no evidence linking Richard Allen to the Unalivings. However, in his affidavit for search warrant, Liggett attempted to drum up as much connectivity as he could muster between Richard Allen and the Unalivings to convince Judge Diener that it was more likely than not that evidence of the Unalivings would be found in Richard Allen's house and vehicles. So he's saying it's got to be in his house, and we're going to find it in that search. In our search, we'll find the evidence. Essentially is what Liggett swore and affirmed linked Richard Allen to the crime. So these are why Liggett believes it's Richard Allen. So these are, we'll see. This memo's already broken down all of these particular issues, but we can do that too if we need to. All right, so number 1, Richard was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30. That's not true. We know that that's a lie. Richard owns a blue coat. Richard owns guns. Richard owns knives. Well, a lot of people do, and especially in that area too, they do go hunting and things like that. So a lot of people, blue collar people out, they go hunting and they have a lot of Carhartt jackets in this area. Like everyone owns one apparently. So, none of these are proof of a crime. Liggett's claim, while withholding key evidence, that a black Ford Focus was parked at the CPS building between 1:30 and 4 p.m., which we know that's a lie. Liggett's claim, while withholding key evidence, that Betsy Blair observed a man on a bridge that Liggett claimed was Richard Allen. We know that's a lie. Liggett's claim, while withholding key evidence, that Sarah Carbow observed a man walking down the road that Liggett claims was 1, was Richard Allen, and also 2, the same man that Betsy Blair viewed on the High Bridge. That's it. That's all. With all of the evidence linking Brad Holder, Patrick Westville, Elvis Fields, Johnny Messer, and Rod Abrams to the Unalivings as discussed in Part 2, Liggett did not seek a single search warrant for any of those high-level suspects. None. Not a single search warrant for any of them. However, 26 days before the election, Liggett made a choice to seek a search warrant for Richard Allen's house based upon the items 1 through 7 above. And this whole memo just broke all of those down and into shreds as to why that doesn't mean it's Allen. It's crazy. All right. No search warrant. However, 26 days before the election, Liggett made a choice to seek a search warrant for Richard Allen's house based on those items. Again, just nuts. Let's run through the list one by one. Oh, goody. I like this memo. It's very well organized. Number 1, Richard Allen was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30. The single solitary source for this information is Dan Doolin from the Department of Natural Resources. Therefore, in order to confidently trust that Richard Allen actually said that he was on the trail between 1:30 and 3:30, as stated in Liggett's affidavit, Dan Doolin's work product would also have to be trusted. Words matter when talking to someone. For example, if the exchange between Dan Doolin and Richard Allen was this: "Hey Richard, we think the girls were abducted between 1:30 and 3:30. Were you on the trail at any point in time between 1:30 and 3:30 on February 17th? And Richard answered, yes. That does not mean that Richard Allen was actually on the trail the entire time between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. However, Doolin could memorialize that exchange as Richard claiming he was on the trail the entire 2-hour time span. If so, Doolin's report would be inaccurate. Therefore, Doolin's accuracy in writing reports may need to be considered and scrutinized. The defense does not have to go very far in scrutinizing Doolin's accuracy in report writing. It can start with a report Doolin wrote about his interaction with Richard Allen. The conversation between Richard Allen and Dan Doolin came about when Richard Allen called the tip line to provide the limited information that Richard may have had from the time that he was on that trail. So he reached out to them. As it said earlier in this memo, Richard was like, hey, I might have some information that might be useful. I think I'll give the police a call. And now he's sitting in prison. All right, so at the conclusion of Doolin's interview with Richard Allen, Doolin prepared his report. However, Doolin screwed up the most basic of tasks, getting the name right. Doolin was so sloppy in drafting the report that he put Richard Allen's name into the system as Rick Allen Whiteman. That's interesting. Here's the footnote. When Liggett was asked if Doolin made any mistakes in the report, he drafted, following his interview, Liggett responded, none that I'm aware of, no. But fellow Unified Command member Jerry Holman had a different answer. There was an error. I don't know if it was processing or whatever you want to call it, but at some point it got lost in the shuffle and entered incorrectly. All right, so some point it was just entered incorrectly. Before being forced to sell their house and move away from the community that they loved because of the horrific allegations that Rick brutally unalived these two girls, Richard, or Rick, Allen, and his wife, Kathy, lived for many years on Whiteman Drive. This is probably the source of Doolin's mistake. Find Exhibit 123, Doolin's unclassified whatever report, which shows DNR officer Dan Doolin identifying Richard Allen as Rick Allen Whiteman. In the system, so that's what he is in the system. So since he can't necessarily trust DNR Dan's accuracy in writing reports, at least there would be a tape recording that would be able to provide the precise words used by Richard Allen. Right? Wrong. Find attached Exhibit 124, which is a report provided to the defense in discovery from DNR Dan concerning his interview of Richard Allen. In this report, DNR Dan, it's funny, I kept calling him DNR Dan. DNR Dan wrote the following: I checked my audio recordings and cannot find one for him. I will keep looking because I am sure I recorded every interaction I had related to my assigned leads. And this is crazy too, because now we have, we've discovered that there are interviews from multiple suspects, people that should have been suspects at the time, like Brad Holder and Patrick Westville, were interviewed immediately within days. People had already kind of identified them as being potentially part of it, and those interviews somehow got wiped. just recently the defense came out and said that there's evidence missing, and those interviews could have been key witness evidence, witness statements that were given at the police station, like right after the Un-Alivings had happened too. So it would have been fresh and new, and you would have been able to see, if it had been recorded, you would have been able to see Brad Holder and his reactions, Patrick Westville, his reactions. But no, we don't have it because it got taped over. That's what we were told. And now these audio recordings can't be found. So isn't that interesting that all of these recordings, which should be standard protocol for police officers to record anyone they're interviewing, it's there's no excuse not to have this information. Of course, another source of information of what time Richard Allen was in the trails that day is Richard Allen himself. As discussed previously in this memorandum, Richard Allen told Liggett that he arrived on the trails around noon and left around 1:30 p.m. This was information that Liggett concealed from Judge Diener. Richard's black Ford Focus was not parked at the CPS building at 2:15, according to Betsy Blair. This was also information that Liggett concealed from the judge. Liggett also failed to inform Judge Diener that DNR Dan cannot be trusted to perform the most basic of tasks when conducting an investigation. Get the name right. I mean, geez, yeah. Can you name your suspect at least correctly if that's who you're going to arrest for double homicide and abduction and whatever else they have them on. Oh, my meds are making my mouth really dry while I'm talking. I apologize. Trying to get this close. All right, so Liggett swearing under oath that Richard Allen was on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30 p.m. based upon Dan Doolin's lost and unrecorded interview may not be the best benchmark for Judge Diener to rely on. Unfortunately, Judge Diener would not know the unreliability of Doolin's report because Liggett never let him know. 2. Richard Allen owns a blue coat, as do millions of other men. 3. Richard owns guns, as do millions of other men. Richard owns knives, as do millions of other men. His black Ford Focus was parked at the CPS building between 1:30 p.m. and 4 p.m. As the court knows by now, at 2:15 p.m., Betsy Blair observed a vehicle parked at the old CPS lot that resembled a 1965 non-black Comet with an angular design. This was not Richard Allen's vehicle. More importantly, Tony Liggett concealed the fact from Judge Diener that she saw this vehicle that was not a Ford Focus. Number 6. Betsy Blair observed a man on a bridge that Liggett claimed was Richard Allen. As the court knows by now, the man that Betsy Blair observed on the bridge was a 20-year-old kid with brown, poofy hair that did not resemble Rick Allen. This is not surprising considering that Rick Allen left the Monon Trail at 1:30 and therefore was not on the high bridge when Betsy Blair observed the 20-year-old kid walking on it. So Rick's black Ford Focus was not on the CPS lot at 2:15, which is further evidence that Rick Allen was not on the bridge as he had already left the trails. Again, Liggett concealed that Betsy Blair identified a young man on the bridge and not Rick Allen. So why are we hiding all of this information? Because you basically just reverse engineered your I don't know what they did in their investigation, to be honest. They ignored so many things and tried to ignore certain key facts. All right, so Sarah Carbow observed a man walking down the road that Liggett claims, one, was Richard Allen, and also, two, the same man that Betsy Blair viewed on the High Bridge. As the court knows by now, Sarah Carbow observed a man wearing a tan coat and muddy pants. This man does not meet the description of the man that Betsy Blair observed on the bridge, which, according to Liggett, is the same man that Carbow observed on the 300 North. And because Richard Allen's black Ford Focus was not at the CPS lot at 2:15 p.m. when Betsy Blair passed by and saw a 1965 Comet-looking car at the CPS lot, Richard Allen could not have been the man walking down 300 North could not have been the man walking down the 300 North Street. Liggett lied to Judge Diener when he claimed that in 2017 Sarah Carbow observed a man with a blue coat and muddy and bloody clothing. All right, we're almost there, you guys. We did it in 9 parts. I thought it was going to be 10, but we did it in 9. All right, so conclusion of part 5. Richard Allen is not connected to these horrific murders in any way. Liggett attempted to convince Judge Diener that evidence of these unalivings would be found in Rick's home over 5 years after the girls were slain, based upon the 7 enumerated reasons identified above, which this memo just destroys. If Liggett had been honest, then Judge Diener would not have signed the warrant. Liggett wasn't honest in the first place, so Richard's lack of any connection whatsoever to the crime scene combined with Liggett's lies and concealment merit a Frank's hearing. I think it merits getting these charges thrown out because it's all done off of a bad warrant and his rights are being violated. But anyways, to prevail on its request for the court to set this matter for a Frank's hearing, the defense must make a substantial preliminary showing that omitted the false statements were made knowingly or intentionally or with reckless regard. If the trial court concludes that omitted facts or false statements were necessary for the finding of probable cause, the trial court should set a hearing on defendant's request. Franks versus Delaware. Indiana's Girth Court actually provided a simple way to access whether a Frank's hearing is justified. Is the concealed and false information contained in the brief the type of information that any reasonable person would have known was the kind of thing the judge would wish to know? The kind of thing that the judge would wish to know, basically, according to all of these other case laws. So the defense provided a very, very long and detailed analysis of the facts because the court must determine whether evidence exists that Liggett acted intentionally or that Liggett acted with reckless regard. The defense believes that the very long and detailed analysis of the facts was necessary to provide a very strong foundation from which this court could conclude that Liggett acted intentionally or with reckless disregard. Or more simply put, the very detailed analysis of the facts allows the court to conclude that yes, the omitted information and false information identified in the memorandum is the type of information that Judge Diener would have wanted to know before signing the warrant. Wherefore, Richard Allen, by and through his attorneys Andrew J. Baldwin and Brad A. Rosie, request that this court set this case for a Frank's hearing, at which time the defense will be asking for the search warrant to be deemed illegal and the fruits of the illegal warrant to be suppressed. So that, like I said, everything from that warrant on is garbage now because the warrant was taken or was done under false pretenses. And so this obviously was submitted by Andrew Baldwin and Brad Rosie for Richard Allen. And that, my friends, we finally got through the Frank's memorandum. Feels kind of good to get that over with. It's pretty, it was a long one, but some very interesting information that I think we can glean from it. And I'm going to go deeper into Odinism and kind of give you a brief overview of what it is and then how it ties into the prison system in the next segment for this. So it'll be a follow-up to this series. So I really hope to see you then. And thank you so much for following along with me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I know there's billions of us out there on YouTube making videos, so I appreciate you spending your time with me. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.